Hey, what's up guys, Tom Wilson here, and my new song, Run For Your Life, just dropped on NCS, together with M.I.M.E.
All I know is I was made for this, paid for this, yeah, slave for this. Been down and I'ma get it right, get on sight like.
So I'm going to show you a breakdown of how I made it. So to start with, I started the whole track off with this loop sound. And this just filters up in the break and has a little reverb reverse when it gets into the next section. So yeah, the actual break is just, again, that guitar sound together with an 808. So yeah, this 808 is just from mine and Jaxie's song Darkness. And I've just set the envelope so it literally just holds and there's no release or attack settings or anything on it. So then we've also got these drums. The kick and snare alone sound like this. Then I added in a bunch of percussion and hi-hats and crashes, and they sound like this. And then there's atmosphere and different effects. So like there's this clap verb sound, which is an impact sound, some ambience, some rain ambience from Kashmir. This atmosphere sound, which is just a bit of a vocal cut up with loads of reverb on it. So altogether, all the elements in the break sound like this. Oh yeah, and in this section, there's also a snare and kick reverse. So the guitar sample and the 808 stop for a second, and the kick and snares reverse into each other. So the drums in this section alone sound like this. So yeah, this just gives a bit of variation. So that's it for the break. It's pretty simple. It's literally just a rap beat. M.I.M.E absolutely killed it with the vocals, so that made it sound 10 times better than it already was. So I'm going to go on to the build next. So the build is just comprised of all the drop elements filtering in. So I'm not actually going to go over the drop elements yet. I'll explain that in a moment. I'm just going to mute these for the moment and show you everything which is original here. So we have the same atmosphere sound as before, some rain, and the same impact sound as before. And then there's a bunch more effects here to help transition this Varian brass sound, which is a reverse stab almost, which helps the sections blend together nicely. We've got this Kashmir impact sounds, and a load more like downlifters and impact sounds and atmosphere just to fill it all up. And then the main two build sounds within this are this snare loop and this kick. So they sound like this. So in terms of synths in the build, I had this piano together with a Reese bass. The Reese bass just has an LFO tool on it to give it some movement in the build. And the piano is just from Contact, and it's literally just got an EQ on it to cut out the low end. So the build elements which filter up together sound like this. Since all the build elements are actually bussed to a single channel, it's easy just to filter these up with a DGM filter. And then also the vocal chop is filtering up during this section as well. And finally, the vocals. So I actually added a vocoder to thicken the vocals out in this section. So the vocoder sounds like this.
First off, you don't run nothing. All talking, no team bluffing. My squad will dream crush it. We rush it, no discussion. All I know is I was made for this. Paid for this, yeah, slave for this. Been down and I'ma get it right.
And the vocals aren't processed in any special way. They just sound like the rest of the track, and there's some doubles as well.
First off, you don't run nothing. All talking, your team bluffing. My squad will dream crushing.
So yeah, this is something I do in all my tracks. On the master, I like to put an endless smile, so when it builds, it just filters out a bit of low end, and also add some reverb to make it a little bit more weaker as such before the drop, so the drop hits harder. There's a volume automation on the master to make the volume duck slightly before the drop, and then there's also stereo separation, which is making the song more mono before it drops, so when the drop hits you get that nice wide hit. Altogether the build sounds like this. It's probably going to lag a lot because my computer can't handle this project well, but here it is.
First off, you don't run nothing. All talking, your team bluffing. My squad will dream crushing. We ain't rushing, no discussion. All I know is I was made for this. Paid for this, yeah, slave for this. Been down and I'ma get it right. Get on sight right.
So that leads us nicely into the drop. For the drop, I wanted to make kind of like a classic Tom Wilson future bass drop as such. So to do this, I used some really basic saw chords and layer a bunch of stuff around it to make it more interesting. So with this, I had most of the drop down before I added the vocal chop and decided to add that at a later date. But I was struggling with what lead element to use, and I decided that this vocal chop added a nice amount of energy. So I'll start off by talking about the vocal chop and what I did to it. I literally just found this vocal on Splice again, which sounded like this when I got it.
Run for your life.
So the first thing I did with this was cut it up to make this vocal chop.
Run for your life. Run for your life. Run for your life.
So the process I did with this was mainly distorting this, adding some reverb and automating this reverb to make it sound more washed out at points, then also just EQing it so it fit in with the mix well. So yeah, the vocal chop with the reverb sounds like this. So you'll hear it's more washed out at places. This gives kind of like more movement to the track as such and makes it more interesting. And then there's also this DJM filter, which is just filtering down at points to give more space to the other elements in the drop at that point. So yeah, next I'll talk about all the synths I use in the drop. So there is a lot of stuff layered in here. I feel like I tend to overproduce this sort of music when I make it. I try and add loads of different layers. But the main basis of these drops is adding a nice hard initial punch. And then for the next section is having this LFO, which just controls all of the synths so they sound tight together. So we have this initial stab here, which is comprised of the chords and the bass, and it sounds like this. And then it goes into this section with the LFO. So this is just all the synths on a bus, on the same bus, and it's got an automation for the volume. So none of the synths last longer than they should, and it controls them really nicely. And then I've got an automation for the LFO, which is also on this channel. Yeah, so that just looks like this, and that's being automated to turn on when these long chords hold. So let me break down the layers. First of all, we have this saw sound. We've got this one. Then we have these bass layers. So yeah, that's the sub. A really distorted brass sound, which is super dry. Another brass stab. That mid bass. And then a sort of higher mid bass, which altogether sounds like this. And then finally for the drop synths, we have this sort of 8-bit sound, which is literally, I believe, just a square wave, and it sounds like this. So yeah, this has got some cool processing on. It's got a deep blue crusher, some distortion, and it's also got a pancake, so it's panning from left to right. So without any effects, it sounds like this, and with effects, it sounds like this. So also in the drop, we have some audio samples, which I have. Now, these are super random. I don't know why I ended up using this, but I think I was trying to find stuff to use for like a vocal chop, and I found this. Cut up this tiny part of that sample and just repeated it over and over again. And added some processing. So without processing, it sounds like this. So yeah, just some distortion, some bit crusher, and some EQ. And that just layers really nicely with the rest of the sounds to add something more unique to the chords. So that sounds like this. And then without it, it sounds like this. So it's just adding another top layer to it. And we've also got the guitar from the break with some distortion on. We've just got some camel crusher, some OTT, and then again EQing it. And that's at the end of that phrase. And again, that's just another layer to all the synths. Altogether, it sounds like this. So yeah, let me play all the synths through so you know what they sound like. So at the end of the drop, the same bus I used for that LFO on the synths filters down and the vocal comes in. So it sounds like this.
Been down and I'ma get it right. Down sight like. Been down and I'ma get.
So yeah, as you can see here, just a DJM filter automation filtering down before it goes into the next phase of the drop. Now, the next phase of the drop is basically the same as the first half of the drop, except there's a slight variation in the vocal chop. So the vocal chop melody actually pitches at a point, so it sounds like this. And yeah, that's the main variation in this drop. So all the percussion is too big to fill on the page, so I'm just going to go through each element quickly and then show you it all together. So I'll work from the bottom upwards. We've got some hi-hat loops. I like to layer a bunch of different hi-hats and cymbals to make it more interesting in the drop. This impact sound. A Fabian Mazur hi-hat loop. We've got some reverse texture sounds. Some more cymbals. More hi-hats. 3 snares put together to make the main snare. So that comprised of this one, and this one. 3 kicks. There isn't actually 3 kicks. It's the main body of the kick with 2 top kicks as such, so the low end is filtered out of these so they don't clash. And the kick is also reversing into the next section of the phrase, which sounds like this. So yeah, altogether the percussion sounds like this. A lot of detail work. I like to fill in all the spaces with a bit of percussion or an atmosphere effect if I can. Okay, so the second break, build and drop of the song are pretty much the same. So I'm not going to break it down, but I'll explain what I did for the arrangement quickly. So the second break is literally just exactly the same as the first one. Just obviously different verse. And the only different thing is this atmosphere string comes in. Which sounds like this. Such a tiny detail. And then we go into this breakdown section before the second build, which sounds like this.
First off, you don't run nothing. All talk and your team bluff it. My squad, we all dream crush it. We ain't rush it. No.
And this is basically just the piano, the Reese bass with the LFO on, and the loop, the guitar loop repeated over and over again, which is filtered with no drums or anything. So it just opens up and allows the chorus to be sung again before the build. And just adds some variation to the second half of the song. The second build, again, is pretty much the same as the first, except the percussion comes in straight away and there is another percussion loop added to the build, which is this one here. And yeah, the kick and snare come in straight away, which sound like this. Now, as you can hear, I've cut up the snare loop there so you can hear it pitching to begin with and then pitching again. But in the context of the song, you could barely hear this and it sounded good. So yeah, the second drop is actually just the same as the first. I don't think I switched up any elements at all, but I felt like for this track, it worked really well and it didn't need switching. So yeah, I hope you all learned something from this. I hope you enjoyed it. Feel free to check out my YouTube channel. Hopefully that's linked below. I'm going to break down more songs that I do in the future, and I've actually broken down my track Be Myself on there already. So if you want to watch that, go watch it now. Thank you everyone for watching, and peace.